Hi, we are Four Legs, and now welcome to our demo. So right here you can see the login page. So we use a role-based access. So we have 4 different roles, namely the front office, the compliance, the legal team, as well as the superintendent, which has access to all the different roles. And so let's log into the compliance right now to simulate the compliance user. And so when you go in, you'll be at the main page. And so what you see here at the left side is basically all the transactions that we have processed using our agentic workflow to analyze the transactions. And over here we have, as we're speaking now, we have live transactions coming in as well. So let's take a look at one of the transactions that we have analyzed. So looking over here in the report, we have many different details, things like risk assessment, risk score, and these are all within our multi-agent and agentic workflow, which interacts with each other to come up with evidences for the analysis. And now let's take a look at the alerts that you have came up with. You have clicked the view alerts button, and over here we have seen that there's one alert that is for our compliance team, as you can see over here. So this is only allowed for our compliance users to handle, and you can either trigger a remediation workflow or reject it. So let's say we're going to trigger it, and so if you click the button, you will trigger the remediation workflow. Now next, moving on, we also have another feature which is being able to take a look at all the different regulatory rules that we use in our analysis. So we have both the internal and external circular rules that can be accessed, and you can filter them by clicking the buttons here, as well as even things like filtering based on the regulators. And so you can see here, these are all filtered already in terms of our regulator in HKMA. And so for example, right now we want to write a rule to our internal. This is only able to be conducted by our compliance team. So for example, now we're going to paste a JSON. We can validate and make sure it can be posted into our database of internal rules, and after that we can submit it. So once you submit it, it has been successful, and we can search for it now. So for example, you can search things like all client transactions. So right now, after we have already stored our new internal rule, we can also query it and see that it's already stored in our database. And so you can see this is the rule that we had stored. And so what you can do is you can open it up, and you can see basically this is the new rule that we have stored. And you can see details about it, like the actual chunk of text that is stored within it. And also another thing you could do is, for example, in our external rules, you can do things like filtering based on MES, and thereafter clicking here and then going to the source to actually see the actual PDF that contains the external circular regulatory rules. You sending now? It says I'm sending a file. Okay, let me do this one. Next up, also in each transaction that we have analyzed, we can also do a document upload to basically upload a document that is related to the transaction, things like invoices or even contracts, passport, etc. kind of documents. It will do a document corroboration check and output a document structural verdict on the transaction. And thereafter, after we have get our analyzed verdict from the documents, we also take our part 1 agentic workflows transaction analysis verdict and use the two of them as evidences for our integration layer to basically make use of both agentic workflow outputs to come up with cross-reference alerts. And this would also help us to trigger even more sophisticated remediation workflows that could help us to prevent all these kind of fraudulent transactions from happening and prevent anti-money laundering. Also furthermore, if let's say you just want to analyze a document, you need not use a specific transaction here to analyze the document. You can come to our navigation bar here and click upload to do the same uploading and analysis on the document. Now let's talk about how anti-money laundering is a very prevalent problem and why we need to actually make use of different intelligence systems to counter this problem. For context, a lot of these kind of problems are prevalent since a very long time ago, but they used to be more static and more rigid and more predictable, and hence more traditional kinds of models were able to detect them. But nowadays, scams are rapidly changing and they are becoming more dynamic and being more sophisticated. So we have to use things like agentic workflows, where we use agents to use the flexibility in agents to basically detect even more hard to spot kind of issues and EML kind of detection. And so let me introduce now our product, which is SLEnTH. SLEnTH is an intelligent automated AML assistant, which is broken down into two different main agentic workflows. The first one being transaction monitoring, and the second part being document corroboration and fraud detection. And now we'll be talking about the system architecture and also the deep dive into the agentic workflow.
This is how our architecture will be. So firstly, to ingest our internal rules, we'll allow front end to be able to ingest internal rules from the rules team. Where they want to update new rules, they can update through the front end. And for external circulars, we have cron job that will be run daily to scrape these rules from the three major sources: MAS, FINMA, and HKMB. Then these internal rules and external circulars will be chunked, embedded, and stored into our vector DB as well as our Postgres DB. This vector DB will be later retrieved for our agentic flow. We have a transaction simulator that will constantly post towards our server, and our server will then queue this transaction on Redis. Then our salary worker will get this transaction and then process it through the agentic flow part 1. Thereafter, it will update the DB with its compliance checks and reports. Then you can run the agentic workflow part 2 through our uploading document through our front end. And once the part 2 document is generated and summarized, the agent will be able to compare these two verdicts and then come up with a
Deep dive into our first part, agentic workflow. So we have many agents that are going to interact with one another, starting from our context builder agent. So it uses LLMs to decide if each of the retrieved rule from our vector database is indeed applicable to the specific transaction that we're trying to analyze. And thereafter, you will also provide the rationale for it and a confidence score for each one of them. And next up, we also have the evidence matching agent, which will map all the transaction fields to the evidences that we have gathered from the rules. And moving on, we also have rule compliance tester, which will test all the applicable rules that we have retrieved and see if the transaction pass or fail them, or even like a partial kind of passing rate. And thereafter, we will have our feature engineering agent, which will extract more kinds of features, especially looking at the data sequentially and not individually at one transaction. As nowadays, many transactions are shown to be actually conducted in sequence in several transactions, which also has been shown in research that aggregated time window features are actually more useful in detecting frauds. And next up, we have also our AML pattern detection, which would detect 5 key kinds of money laundering patterns through our transaction data. Moving on, we also have our probabilistic risk updater, which uses the concept of Bayesian networks to basically come up with probabilistic inferences. And thereafter, this will be actually provided as substantial additional evidence for our analyst agent later on. And therefore, this will also come to our final risk scorer, which would take all the evidences that we have currently and do an actual analysis and come up with an aggregated risk score. And thereafter, we have our alert generator, which would generate all the alerts based on the analysis of our transaction to come up with what are the necessary alerts for the company that is receiving all these transactions. And thereafter, in the remediation action planner, it will basically allow users to trigger workflows to counter the alerts that have been raised up and flagged by the transactions that have been passed through. And lastly, the database persistence agent will create the compliance analyst record and store all the analysis and alerts back into our database for logging as well as display in our front end.
Moving to our document and image analysis workflow. First, the document will be intake through our front end, which validates PDF, JPG, and PNG. Then it will be passed through our OCR to extract text from images, handles multi-language documents, English and Chinese, processes scan PDF and images file. Next, it will go through format validation, which identifies formatting inconsistencies, validates document completeness, checks spelling grammars, and after it will move to NLP validation. It will check for logical inconsistency in text, detects contradictory statements, verifies names and entities are consistent, and check for suspicious language patterns. Following which, it will be image forensics, which analyzes EXIF metadata, detects AI-generated images, and identifies photo editing and checks for paste tampering. Next, we'll move on to background checks. We will extract name from document. Queries will check one API to check for the person background. And then after that, we'll move on to cross-reference, which links documents to related transaction, compares with previously uploaded documents, and validate consistency across multiple documents. Following which, we have document risk, which aggregates findings from all previous agents, followed by a report generator, which compiles all findings into a structured report and creates a PDF summary with visualizations. Lastly, evidence storekeeper will save everything in the PostgreSDB and then store the extracted text and metadata so that we can be displayed in the front end.
So in conclusion, our agent is not any kind of agent that's able to do analysis on any kind of transaction. We specifically use the intelligence and efficiency as well as flexibility in modern LLM agents to basically learn, provide them with a goal and come up with a proper analysis for us to identify as many fraudulent transactions as possible. And this helps us to build agents that are able to interact well in dynamic environments nowadays. Thank you.